And a couple of things to note there. Sorry. The assignments, thank you for those who've got those in. I'm starting to mark them, and yeah, already had a quick look and very impressed. Well done. There's I'll next week give out some prizes as well for the assignment work. But if you haven't yet put in your research assignment, you've got to get that in. At the end of this session, I'm going to allocate you a road safety audit to do of a design, and you'll get a template to use, and you'll be asked to go out and do a road safety audit. I'll explain that at the end, but it's that's the big assignment for this course. Now, we're covering off cyclists and motorcyclists in this session, and we are trying to hone our lens there about what a road safety auditor would look for with these particular road user groups. And I'm going to start with cyclists, and we'll go from there. So a bit like we did with pedestrians, I'm going to identify some of the requirements for safe travel for cyclists, point you at some technical information, just a few of the things, and then also some common road safety audit issues for cyclists. And I'll just use a few case studies to get us in that frame of mind. Basic cycling facilities and terminology. So a few, I suppose, concepts to consider, requirements for cyclists. I like to think about separation, sight lines, space to ride, the surface provided, speed maintenance, which I'll talk about in a little bit, connectivity and information. But really, for a road safety auditor, we should be trying to think like a cyclist. And we often have the advantage that a lot of road safety auditors are people that ride bikes, or they have been in the past, so they've got a bit of a feel for it. So that helps out. But you just ask yourself those logical questions of, would I feel safe riding there? And, if I turned, would I be able to see me? And my enduring zones. And the Australia's Guide to Road Safety Part 6 road safety audit has those prompt lists in the back and covers cyclists with these sorts of questions guiding you in your thinking. But the question I often sort of scratch my head a little bit, and I'm sure some of you do as well, is, well, what do we mean by a cyclist or a person that ride bikes? Because it's quite a varied road user group. Now, a lot of the time we talk about a design philosophy of 8 to 80. And if you design your city and your area for an 8-year-old and an 80-year-old, you've got this city that should cater for everybody in between. Now, it doesn't quite work as well for cyclists, because there are these particular cyclist groups that don't quite act in that similar manner, being the lycra-clad training cyclists or the cargo bikes style cyclists, and we've got e-bikes as well to consider. So it becomes an interesting one. A bit of judgment is required by the auditor in considerations and recommendations if you're in a jurisdiction doing recommendations. But the Australia's Guide, as I said, Part 6 has some good stuff in there, good prompt lists. Victorian government at one point did come up with this document, which is a bit of guidance for shared path audits, and I'll take you through some of that right at the end of the cycling component here, and some of the things we would consider with that. And then in terms of standards and guidelines, what is there available? Of course, there's the Australia's Guide to road design part 6A, which is the paths for walking and cycling. We've got this other interesting document, which is cycling aspects of the Austroads guides, which tried to collect together all the little bits and pieces from around the Austroads guides around cycling to put them all into one spot. We've got our 1742 part 9, which is bicycle facilities. New South Wales has got a series of documents. Victoria's got documents. TMR in Queensland, I find, does some of the more useful and comprehensive ones. Some local governments have ones, different guidance, and then around the world we've got the Crow manual being the cycling infrastructure design sort of Bible, and then there's a series of other things out there that you can look at. We're actually quite flushed for guidance and design guides and reference material for cyclists, and cycling infrastructure is quite good. Roads, for passenger vehicles still there's more, but cyclists good, and then we get into pedestrians and motorcyclists really lacking on specific guidance. The New South Wales bicycle toolkit, I haven't had much to do with it and used it much, so I can't really comment on that. So I'll check it out again. I'm taking a note. Do others like it? Are others using it?
Okay. It's relatively new, Ken. It's kind of come in with movement and place in our organisation. So
great. Okay, I'll check it out. Always good to see these new and exciting resources as they pop up. That's good. Thanks. Okay, straight into a finding, road safety audit finding. I use this one straight off the bat because I think it's clear. It's a cycling issue. Almost don't even need to explain it. I think the picture explains it quite well. But I explain the context an auditor might find the longitudinal grades. So obviously, if you're looking at an existing bit of road, you might see this. But in audit findings, for me, it's coming up a bit where there is an alteration. So there's intersection upgrades happening or upgrades to a length of road, and there are longitudinal grades existing, and they're not planned. There's no changes to them proposed in this. And sometimes the design may encourage more cyclists, but even if it's not, it's something you note in there that's an issue and it's going to remain. So that's one. Another one which I'm finding a bit more of. I found this in a couple of the sort of tactical urbanism style projects, pop-up bike lane projects that we audited, where they'd sort of alter a route through an area to separate from vehicles, and there would be a longitudinal grade in there. So those ones were much higher risk because obviously these are going to be lots of bikes and going directly through it. And I've been involved in a couple of legal cases, expert witness around these. One was a big shopping centre upgrade where they had done upgrade works. They'd added bicycle parking, storage parking. They had some signage directing off a shared path, a popular shared path through a part of their car park to that entry and that storage area, and there were 4 longitudinal grades along that section they were directing. So that it's an interesting one. It sort of shows that road safety auditing can help in a wider variety of scenarios. There was no road safety audit done in the expert witnessing. I said, well, I've been teaching the road safety audit course for over a decade now, and the first example I use in the cycling section is a longitudinal grade. It's a road safety audit 101. It's an issue that we be very aware of. That was one, and the other was an existing road with a longitudinal grade, and the debate became around whether the local government, or the interesting part of the case was around whether the local government had appropriate processes and systems in place to review their infrastructure for deficiencies from more than just absolute compliance with the road management Act and the requirements under that. Is it as prevalent with tram tracks? So tram tracks are a very interesting one, and something that certainly growing up in Melbourne, I'm quite used to. We still try to create our design so you run parallel. You don't run parallel and close to a tram track, and cross perpendicular. There's some interesting concepts out there for tracks and bikes, which some of you may have seen. My colleague Max McArdle was doing some of that Newcastle light rail review and specialist advice, which is some interesting stuff out of that. But the interesting one I always find quite interesting is these ones where they've got you got your track, and then there's a sort of cover over it with I don't know exactly how they do it, but it's sort of spring thing and it's on a hinge essentially. So the weight of the light rail or the tram pushes that down, but a cyclist will go over it without dropping in, or if they run parallel with it, they'll be on it. I think that's kind of neat, but I mean, the practical, how that would play out from a maintenance perspective and a few other things would be always interesting, but at least people are looking at it. But yeah, running people perpendicular to any rail is always a good thing. An interesting one here, an audit associated with cycling improvements to a road and application of green warning paint, but also bicycle storage boxes, which are areas where you create so cyclists can come up the side of vehicles, get in front, get in that position so they can be seen and then continue forward. But this side road at this signalised intersection, as auditors, once we are out there and watch the operation, you see that they run a left turn green arrow with a right when Blythe Street here is exiting, and so the addition of a storage box there just creates a scenario where bikes can be sort of in the middle of the lane there, and you will have a green arrow. Now it's a bit of a head scratcher to risk rate that, because you'd be fairly confident that nobody's going to miss the rider who's in the middle of the lane there. And it's a road rage. There'll be road rage for sure. But what's the sort of road safety issue? Potentially around vehicles sort of going around cyclists and causing other issues that way. So I suppose the thing that relaxed us as an audit team about where we exactly land on the risk rating of that was that it's just wrong and it'll be fixed, and it's a design stage and those sort of things. So there's not too much worry about how to risk rate that. We risk rated a medium in the end, but of course it was fixed. Okay, one to get you going, give out a few prizes potentially. I'm going to show a existing bit of path cycling path, walking path, and I want you to find me some issues, and I'll give a prize to the first person who can tell me which country it's in when I show it first, if anybody knows the country. And then I want you to type in issues if you were doing existing conditions road safety auditing of this area. So there it is. It's in the UK, it's Wales. So what do we got there? Nicole and Justin. It is in Wales. So let's see, what do we got? So we've got tactiles, Justin's pointing out. So we'll have get into that. Okay, some good ideas coming in, and okay. All right. Bridget's got in there with one that I was hoping you would see, just because I've just been talking about it. So there's a longitudinal grape in there. It's always a little hard if you're not out there actually to see it, but that one runs perpendicular for cyclists on the road. It's Justin. Okay. Perpendicular for riders on the road, but yeah, for the cyclists right at the cycle facility, it's that. But then we've also got lots of people pointing out the sightline impediments with the fence. We've got some people who are talking about, is it clear who's got priority? We look at the lighting. So interesting, then there's a little bit of discussion about the signage here. And yes, your Welsh is good enough, you can translate that to cyclist dismount. So we've got the sightline issue, but we've told cyclists to dismount. So that solves the issue, does it? Well, this is where road safety auditors are a voice of reality here, because cyclists are not going to dismount. Cyclist dismount signs are probably the most useless sign we have in our toolkit, I would say. And well, one of their biggest benefits is that they tell road safety auditors where there's an issue, because the traffic engineers have come up, with an issue and they've just popped a sign there. Just thought I'd throw this feature in as sort of the height of stupidity with cyclist dismount signs. So we need to be realistic with it. And it goes beyond just the cyclist dismount sign. The auditor isn't there to say, theoretically, if everybody, was to follow this, that we would have a safe outcome. It's to say, realistically, how are people going to use these facilities and what are the issues? Yeah. Okay, so that's that one. Oh, actually, I might go back just to this. I mean, we've got some interesting, really interesting space with cyclist priority facilities. And I will show you give you some information on this later, but certainly, you know, if cyclist priority through here and raising that, you're still going to want to do something with this fence line because you want some sight lines there for vehicles to see approaching cyclists and vice versa. But you could get a pretty nice outcome that way. Okay, this one was a really interesting audit that we were undertaking, and so there's a bit of a story to it, and it'll give a few learnings or a few insights. So this was a decent sized subdivision, and it was the infrastructure was completed, the roads and paths and crossings were all completed, and so the local government had asked for a post-opening road safety audit. They were still building some of the houses, but and you know, went in there and did the audit, found a variety of things. But one of the interesting ones was this shared path facility that was where you'd usually have a footpath position, but it was designated as a shared path. And then a number of the houses had high fences up with the with the garage right there. So we're going to have cars popping out, no sight lines for anybody to see that. And so I think, you know, that's a road safety audit issue. We are, again, undenied about how you risk rate this. And we got to our point there as high risk. And then we made some recommendations of, well, I mean, here's one learning. I mean, at post-opening stage in this, we did not feel that we should be recommending the relocation of that whole path. Now, that would be a really great outcome, but it's sort of that understanding of the context of it that's really never going to happen. And so we were more recommending the cut down fences, removing panels, opening up those sight lines. The next learning on this one was, was that we handed this over, this report. Client, being the local council, receives it, comes back to us and says, well, thanks for the report. We like, you know, you found some good stuff in there. Thank you for those. There's that one you've got about the fences, the high fences. Can you please just remove that from the audit report? Because that's, yeah, we've approved the development. That's part of the, you know, internal private property. It's part of the specific guidelines or code or standard that they had. And so take it out of the audit, please. Going, yeah, no, we won't do that. You know, happy to chat with you further about ideas and the like, but we've identified it as an issue. Just because it's very awkward and hard to alleviate this doesn't mean it's not an issue. So it stays in. And yeah, it's not an easy thing because you're making their lives hard, but if you identify it, it's risky, you've got to stick to having it in there. Now, yeah, I mean, if you get out there and you're doing commercial auditing as a business, that can be that. They've never asked us to do another audit for them, but so be it. You know, that's sometimes what might happen. Yeah, that's right. Nicole's sort of hit the nail on the head. You can agree with it's an issue, and you may not be able to do anything. You just got to put some actual work into justifying why or I do that. They actually did do something. They ended up having to pay for the alterations. The local government did, but they acknowledged it. Then they changed their sort of standard approval of these and identified that. So it's like a bigger picture win for that. So yeah, probably worth it. Yeah, surface alterations, yeah, whether they're grates or pits or surface lids or the like. And it's not just about the instantaneous hit, like a cyclist hits this and comes off. It's also about them altering their riding line and moving out of areas or into more dangerous areas. So during sort of when you're auditing intersections, a number of them don't line up in terms of the lanes. And some of you would see this a fair bit, but if you look at this one, this lane lines up with the curbside one, and the one over here sort of lines up with the footpath. So if we're going to have side swipe crashes going on in here, and they'll be sort of minor severity, you don't like it. But if a cyclist is mixed up in that, we know that they're going to be the ones that get this more serious injuries. So you want to sort of look at that. And then how do you lessen that risk? Well, a few ways you can do it. You can use RPMs, the raised pavement markers. They're the dome-shaped ones, not the RRPM square ones. RPMs are just, yeah, domes, and you place them, but in that, you know, every time you got the cross of the lanes to guide through there. You can guiding lines through the intersection. Yep, that can certainly assist. So that's a good one. You could do head starts for cyclists. You could do more elaborate treatment, which would be to sort of have cycle facilities come off and then come back on somehow. There's a few things that you can start to think about. But yeah, we used to look down plans to see how things lined up. You do it in PDF or CAD these days with your lines. Another one, again, very hard to sort of treat, but when we have stand-up lanes, so we've got vehicle in here. If they're going straight, they're going to come through here, accelerate in, looking over their shoulder to see, you know, that they can. And it's in the sort of, again, the vicinity of cyclists, and you've got a cyclist and a vehicle who's not concentrating on the area where their vehicle is traveling because they're looking back over their shoulder to make that move. Okay. Yeah. So Justin's hit the nail on the head there with intersections that don't line up. But build it like that in the first place is absolutely that would be the best. And if we as auditors can get in there at the design stage and try to strongly encourage that, we're in a far better position. So the old philosophy on cyclists at roundabouts used to be to try to get cyclists out of harm's way, essentially. So trying to push the cyclists as far out as possible as they navigate through. And what we've discovered was the cars would then come through, and larger vehicles sometimes come through and hit cyclists. There was also a secondary reason why this wasn't great, and that was one that the human factors people love and the behavioral psychologists get all excited about. And it's a look but failed to see issue is what it's, or phenomenon is what it's described as. Look but failed to see, or look but did not see sometimes called. And that's where a driver comes up, they're coming up from here, they're looking out here, there's no sightline things blocking. The cyclist is directly in view, yet they continue on through and strike the cyclist. And there's a whole lot of theory around it and lots of exciting PhDs and the like, and theories as to why it happens. And they talk about threat theory, that the cyclist is not a threat, so the reaction time of the driver is lessened, or expectations on what to expect, what they're looking for. So they're looking for a car, and again, it takes them longer to process that. Also, that's a bike, and you should react according to that. But one of the other things was the positioning. It's not in the position that they are expecting, so it slows the process. So all of that sort of combined meant that there was a change to the guidance to say we should have cyclists claim the lane and take a central position in the lane, and try to block vehicles from trying to overtake and be in that more that position. So this is the sort of line marking setup. Does anybody know the name for that symbol there? Yeah, Justin's on it again. The sharrow, that's right. It's a combination of the word shared and arrow. It's a shared space for bikes and pedestrians. Now, there's a couple of points I want to make about this, and maybe this picture specifically. Are you going to let your 8-year-old or tell them to, okay, you're right up here, and then you claim the lane, and you get in the middle, and you've got four-wheel drives bearing down on you, and well, it's a bit of an ask, I would say. So I think we're not quite, we're certainly doing a bit better for the very confident cyclists and the like, but yeah, I'm not sure about that. Second one is that, you can do this. This is good in low speed environments, and as speed gets up, it's not as good. But one little design or auditor recommendation I would make, but design feature is that works really beautifully, is to put a speed cushion at this location. Maybe put some Chemflex down there just so people don't drive into the bike lane to get around your speed cushion. The reason for that position is great is because if you've got a car coming up here and you've got a bike that's sort of here, there's a really big temptation for some drivers to accelerate through in front of the cyclist, and you get some conflict there. This exact point slows the vehicle right at the point that the cyclists are coming in and claiming the lane. So it just really works quite neatly and quite nicely. Again, admittedly for a proportion of the cyclists. And I'll come back to I'll come back to one lane roundabouts with us. What I would say is the best, safest treatment, but we'll get back to that. But 2-lane roundabouts are just highly problematic for cyclists. First of all, turning right from anywhere, you're sort of crossing all these lanes of exiting traffic. You also have a dynamic visual obstruction built into these. So you've got a vehicle there and you've got a vehicle there, and a cyclist is sort of coming around here. We've got that masking. This vehicle might stop, and then this one might continue on through. So we've got that issue. Yeah, and so they're really hard to alter to make safe for cyclists. And there's ways people are playing around with trying to do it with separated facilities around it and the like. Certainly in the Netherlands or somewhere, if you had this, these would be underpasses. and you're never going to try and get cyclists to be crossing these multi-lane roads. We're not probably quite at this stage in Australia with underpasses, and it might be more than it's sometimes, areas where the cyclists have to wait. But again, are we thinking about a broad range of cyclists there, or is that only going to be for some specific cyclist? Cushion roundabout treatment example. That's good. That's good to hear. But really, I mean, the roundabouts that are really cycle friendly are these Dutch style, what they call protected roundabouts, where if you want to, a cyclist wants to go right, they sort of ride up and then they take their own priority path around the intersection like that. But that one's built. That's it's in Melbourne, Moray Street roundabout, and yeah, working really well, and sort of it is the facility you'd be more confident sending an 8-year-old through. So auditors are often engaged as part of innovative projects to try to help assess risk. And I always say that auditors should be, shouldn't be there to block innovation. You should be there to help innovation just happen in the appropriate manner of well-managed risk. And this is an interesting one where there's some innovative design going on here to a separated facility. They created this little pocket where the idea was that a cyclist, this is in the design, the cyclist could stage their journey if they wanted to do a right turn coming from this side, that in there, they'd pause, they'd be able to pause there if they wanted, they'd pause there, and off they'd be able to go. As auditors, you sort of look at that and you go, okay, there's some merit to that. We can see what they're trying to do and the like, but then you've got to be thinking, okay, what do we got? Large vehicles, lots of large vehicles doing left turns out of here. And I'm just starting to get a bit concerned if we're pausing there and we're having large vehicles coming around. And the other thing is that the reason they're interested in cycle facilities in here is it's because it's used quite a lot as a training route. People have it as a particular one that they like to, or quite a few people use it. And it's sort of then a bit of an acknowledgement that, well, if you've got a group of cyclists, we're not going to fit a group of cyclists here. And are they going to use that type of facility to make that? It's more that they just will claim the roundabout, which is very hard for us to do infrastructure treatment to accommodate. But yeah, so they didn't go that. Funnily, one of the other auditors in the audit team refers to that little idea as the mammal pouch. A mammal is an acronym for middle-aged men in lycra. I put my hand up and say I'm a mammal. I get out and do the training rides in the lycra. Yeah, I thought it was a funny name for the little pouch there. This roundabout design is quite interesting to audit in the sense that, from a cyclist perspective here, when you look at the design, we've got worked out what was going on, and it was that the shoulder sort of then goes up into a separated cycle facility, and you can see it's bike only up there. And thought, okay, that's good, because the absolute dominant, really dominant route is that left to right on the screen here. And so cyclists would be predominantly going straight through. So they don't need to mix in with traffic. So that was all good, looking pretty good. And then got to the post opening, and that's how it was constructed. You go, well, that's good, except for if you put yourself in the cyclist saddle, it kind of looks like that's a footpath, doesn't it? And that you've got to go and fight it out in the roundabout. So I think all that infrastructure that was built as there's a tiny little cyclist only sign, for cyclists only, is just not as effective because I don't think as many were using it because they probably just don't think it's there for them. Nice little fix at post-opening stage, bit of green marking there just clarifies that area is for cyclists. So now that's not your traditional use of green, and here it is being used again as a bit of that direction, follow this path. Traditional use of green marking on the road network associated with cyclists is at a conflict point. So you're trying to warn drivers on approach, hey, there could be cyclists crossing at this point. How are we going on time here? I'm going to give you a break as usual. I'll jump into a few of these though. So dooring is that phenomenon of people having their doors in front of bikes, and you get some serious injuries associated with riders hitting doors, but there's I suppose higher severity incidents associated with secondary impacts. So hit the door, rider into traffic lane, and then being struck or run over, and avoiding and sort of mixing in with the traffic seems to be the higher severity incidents around Australia. And we've got lots of scenarios where we are having that big mix of cyclists and vehicles and dooring, and sometimes challenges where it's clearways, where this is parking during one time, but it's clear and it's a running lane. So, if you're doing like bike markings or things, it's kind of in the middle of a running lane for part of the day, so that doesn't quite work. You can do it when you've got permanent parking, but the effectiveness is sort of limited. It helps, but certainly dooring is problem in these scenarios as well. Somebody was killed at this site in a dooring incident. It struck the door into the lane, and a truck was there at that time as well. So really where we are moving to is, if we possibly can, and we've identified it's a priority bike route, or it's got that, we are pushing the parking into the roadway. So we're creating that separated cycling facility, the Copenhagen style lanes, buffered area for passenger door to not get into cycle lane, and it produces some pretty good safety outcomes. As a road safety auditor, what you often, common things you're finding in these sorts of designs or jobs is challenges associated with sight lines being blocked by the parked vehicles and vehicles entering and exiting, and then the challenges to see bikes. If it's a dual direction, a multi-direction cycle facility, that risk goes up even more, because a driver turning in is predominantly looking one direction for approaching cyclists, and the one coming from the other direction is it's very problematic. So you really need to be enhancing your safety thinking in those scenarios. One thing I have recommended a few times, a colleague and I do a few of these sorts of audits, is bluestone or raised treatments at those locations, because vehicles come in slow to navigate over that. they see that, they slow down, they navigate, and then it really helps them pause at that point where they're looking for cyclists. Yeah, garbage trucks. Yep, and people, where to put, people put bins. Store it. There's a lot to nut out in these treatments, but overall they are very effective. It improves safety for cyclists and encouragement of cyclists, and giving people more confidence to cycle who may not be willing to mix with the traffic. People driving into the garbage truck. Yeah, your entry points, you can help to treat that a little bit, and the width of them. If they're wide, yeah, we have seen taxis parking in them as taxi ranks and all sorts of things. So it's got to be considered in design phase.
Ken?
Yeah.
At what point do you go, because like there's a local example I'm thinking of, and there might have been half a dozen to a dozen complaints with a vehicle driving in the facility itself. It's a dual one. But at what point as an order do you go, but we've removed hundreds of trips from the road where a cyclist would be sharing a lane with a car doing 50 k's an hour?
Yeah. Yeah, so this is comes a little bit back to innovation to a degree, and I'll explain why. But we are a set of eyes looking for issues, things that may cause death and serious injury to people, or death, serious injury and other injury to people once the facility is built. Even if we're bringing death and serious injury down significantly, what is remaining is what our focus is as auditors. So I don't think as an auditor I would ever, like, in those situations, you don't want to be recommending removal of this facility or anything like that, because it's providing great value. That would be a worse situation. But what we're doing there is trying to help them develop solutions to minimize that risk. So it could be, different widened splitter treatments, for example, with maybe flexible bollards or something in here. So, you widen it a bit at one bit, but vehicles can't drive in there, or it's very awkward for them to do it. Those sorts of ways that we can keep the underlying safety and try to, just weed out any of those sort of more minor issues. But yeah, that would be a very bad outcome if it is utilised. Your audit report that identifies an issue like that somehow stops these facilities, or gets rid of facilities that are doing an overall better job. So really interesting space we find ourselves in these days with shared path crossings, and there is more and more activity now to give priority to the shared path over side roads and the like, and different signage now. That's the more standard signage used. So what this is, probably the next photo is a better one from there, is that this is the shared path. You're creating an intersection, essentially, and the shared path is the priority. Like, just almost think of the shared path as a road, and this is a normal intersection. So working out your sight triangles on these is an interesting thing to do, because you've got to think about approach speeds of cyclists, approach speeds of vehicles, and then deciding which sight distance calculations you use. Would you use safe gap sight distance, or would you use stopping sight distance? And I can send some guidance on that if anybody is dealing with these situations. Yeah, it's quite interesting. You also want to think about continuity of these. So, you know, if you've got one here and then the next few are like this, and then there's one that's priority the other way around, is that going to be confusing for cyclists? Are some cyclists going to overrun it? I like these treatments. I mean, road safety auditing, a local area traffic management scheme, and you'll see a lot of features go in like chicanes and speed humps and roundabouts and those sort of things, and maybe one-way slow points. A lot of those features in their usual form squeeze cyclists in with vehicles, and you're creating a lot of squeeze points. This is, I think, quite elegant in the way it's been done, in the sense that it provides that cyclist bypass, and the one-way slow point and all that interaction is just car to car, and cyclists get a free run, unabated run through out of harm's way. So I think it's a neat treatment. Okay, just a quick few things on shared paths before we take our break. I'll point you at that document again, but when you're doing an audit of a shared path facility or a cycle facility, you're going to get out there and ride it. And like our practice would be to fit your bike with a dash cam, take some sort of electronic level or a level, so you can measure the grade of different parts of the path. I've got one of those strapped to my back. I use it to measure heights and widths as well, and they're sort of main things. And then you're starting to think about these sorts of issues: path width, obstacles, hazards, horizontal, vertical alignment, surface conditions, and intersections are an interesting point. So intersections, like path-to-path intersections, or intersections with roads, but path-to-path intersections, let's talk about those. A bit like a road intersection: clear priorities, good sight lines, advanced warning, sign guidance. 90-degree is very helpful for that ability to see stuff, and reduce speeds where we need. So that one there, picture, it's a bit unclear which priority is, and when that's up and running with lots of people using it, there might be some issues. Another path priority confusion one here. And then the way we think about road sides, we should be thinking about path sides, like drop-offs, hazards. There's a drop-off close to the edge. That really needs to be having a cyclist-friendly rail there. Here's another one, a drop-off. And you're going to think that these paths are actually probably more likely to have cyclists leave the path than vehicles leave roads, because these are often populated with dogs being walked, or kids, and more erratic things in these paths. So thinking about road sides as well, or path side hazards, within path hazards. And of course, we often use flood-prone areas for these facilities because that's land that's available. And as a result, they often collect a lot of debris and mud and rocks and those sorts of things. So there's particular cyclist-friendly fencing. Yeah, they're often flat too. That's a good point, Justin, from a sort of planning perspective. It's good. Yeah, fences that can catch a handlebar or a pedal are not your cyclist-friendly fences, and so they should be pointed out in your shared path auditing, and recommendations to replace with cyclist-friendly fences, which are those that sort of a cyclist shoulder will collide with it before they're handlebar or pedal is caught on anything. And shared paths are often separated from higher speed vehicle traffic using barrier systems. The back of barrier systems, though, can present a pretty bad hazard for a cyclist. So thinking about how do we do that? So you can back to back your guardrail system. Certainly, more modern guardrail systems have back-to-back options available. You can get post caps and a few other things as well. And the way putting hazards in the path, obviously this wants to stop vehicles entering that environment, but we've got to think about that at night, and it's not well been done. The chains, somebody's probably tied that there to warn other cyclists, I'd say, possibly, that or walkers that's there, because at night that wouldn't be visible at all. So that's not really recommended in that configuration anymore. This is a good example, and it kind of parallels to how you could stop people entering an environment. But the cables stay there in the middle of the path, which is not great. It'd be good to not have a cable stay in the middle of your path. But if, as it is there, it can't be moved, they've done a decent job of line marking on the approach to warn early, flexible bollards, or bollards there. They're the ones that hinge at the base. Retroreflective tape, highlighting the hazard. I think it's a pretty good job all around there. And so for that cycling audit as such, you can have that as a theme of an audit, especially on popular cycle routes. And we've put a fact sheet into Moodle, not on your USB. You don't have a USB. Into Moodle, with just some tips specifically on that and equipment you might want to use and things to particularly look out for. You want to think about cyclists in all audits, absolutely, but these ones just have that enhanced, and you would certainly ride the route as well to give that further enhancement. Okay, done well there. We got through our cyclist stuff. I did have I'm going to give us our break now. Let's take 5 minutes. 5 minutes, come back, and we'll jump into motorcycles, and then I'll give you your big audit task. So back in 5. Okay, I'm going to get back into it. Justin's asked a question in the chat there around ramps and ramp grades on different horizontal alignments, and it's a really valid question, because you're spot on there. There's not great guidance around it. You need to work out your ramp grades off the approach grade, and that then complicates things on the heights of your ramp further down. So I'm probably just telling you what you already know in terms of the challenges associated with. So the guidance is not there, and you always have to do it from a first principles perspective. In CAD, so I've got a design colleague who's been doing some of that in CAD and working things out. I do have a presentation. I don't think I'm going to get time to it today, which, again, that's the race crossing course, which delves into a bit of sort of how to think about that from a first principles perspective. But if you've got specific situations, let me know. I'm happy to have a quick look and or flick you some notes. Okay, so we've been through cyclists there, and now we go to our other two-wheeled road user group. And the final road user group we'll be talking about as a specific, and that's motorcyclists. And I suppose a lot of auditors are cyclists or have been cyclists, but not as many are motorcyclists and have been motorcyclists. So sometimes it's a little bit foreign, and that's why we do, as road safety auditors, often engage a motorcycle rider if it's a popular motorcycle route to be involved in this. I'll add New South Wales to this as well now. So just like the other road users we've been working through, requirements for motorcycle safe travel, some technical information, common audit issues and findings, and some treatments and terminology. Now, some of this content, some of you have been exposed to in the Safe System Assessment course, and it's relevant, obviously, for both. But I'll jump through some of it a bit quicker to give us time to have a chat about what you're going to do. For motorcyclists, 20 to 30 times more likely to be killed than passenger vehicles, highly overrepresented. And we have the different Making Roads motorcycle friendly suites that are available out there. I was involved in the first one of these about 20 years ago, and then we've got lots of evolutions of that have been distributed out. So you've got your particular Transport for New South Wales one, which is there and still available. They just provide you some specific things to think about where our infrastructure creates more risk for motorcyclists than other road users. And a reminder there, the 5 S's of motorcycle safety when we're thinking about infrastructure: sight, surface, signs, strike, speed. Can the motorcycles be seen, and what can the motorcyclist see coming up? What's the surface we're providing? The signs to warn, inform, and guide. The hazard that is being struck, and the speed of this all happens at. We remember risk is likelihood times consequence. And when we think about that, the sight, surface, and signs are influencing the chance of the crash happening in the first place. The strike, well, it's how bad the crash is. And speed is that likelihood and consequences, that magic thing. So let's just jump through these. We've got sight. Motorcyclists being much smaller than even small vehicles. So blocked, hidden behind things and the like. We tend to, in these sort of dimensions, sometimes think about this safety margin, it's called. Why do you think that's in there for motorcyclists? Not as just another safety factor to, because they're more vulnerable, let's give them an extra safety factor. There's a bit of reason behind that. Any ideas? Anybody going to pop that into the chat? We've got some good thinking in there, some good, some good stuff. The adjustments on it, it's actually the lean as they turn and the like is the reasoning behind it. But I do like those other ideas. I think they're all reasons, further reasons why we need to continue to really think about motorcyclists in our road design. But just the small nature of a bike means they're hidden behind small things. Little sign there, hiding half a bike as an example, and even vehicles. So when we're looking at designs, we want to think about where vehicles will prop and what sight lines that'll lock, and motorcyclists will be easily hidden behind vehicles. We want riders to have a good understanding of what they're coming up to, and so that advanced warning of any changes in the horizontal geometry or the like are really important. And we can provide that advice where the road does change in unexpected ways, like this one where we have a 2 radius curve, or a curve that tightens. Anybody know the technical term for that? I might have asked this one to some of you before, but anybody know that where you have a curve that, yeah, it is a compound curve. Well done. Some people call it like a double radius curve, or but like if we were to put a normal hairpin and like a 25 or something advisory, okay, a motorcyclist approaching that, they'll come in to it, they'll go 25, okay, I'm slowing down. Then they'll sort of see that geometry of that curve and alter and find a line and for that. And then as it tightens up, it's just a highly dangerous scenario, because the physics of it is that they're going to push them out to the other side of the road there, or if it goes the other way into the roadside. And here's a real world example, 252 radius curve into a 117. So it tightens up, but it's not super significant, but it does tighten up. And there's 4 motorcycle run-off-road crashes to the outside of curve there, which is quite amazing in a 5-year period. Now, I think there's a compounding factor in the compound curve. There you go. It's that's an unsealed bell mouth, so you've got a bit of gravel wash onto that sealed surface at a point where things tighten up. So and you've got motorcyclists, or sorry, you've got a vehicle. Let's go with, you've got vehicles 1 and 2. So you've got a vehicle there and a vehicle there. This crash happens, it can happen with any vehicles, and it happens with bikes as well. You've got queuing back here and the like. Which though do you think is more often the motorcycles, 1 or 2? Yeah. Yep, 2. Dan's onto that one quick. It is 2, and it's 2 just because the bike's smaller, it's hidden behind those vehicles easier, but motorcycles could be 1 as well. There's that side actually. You see the Pajero here is really trying to look through a truck phantom, and so a rider would be in trouble. So the kind of things that can be done in these situations, again, it's kind of hard, but you could signalize it or partially signalize it. I mean, that would be an option, to put a dual aspect signal there. You can either link it to these signals, or you can put a loop in the road there. So when your cue's back to there, sort of trigger that, or maybe both the loop and connecting to the signals. So that's one option, but you can also do things like, we could close the intersection, of course. You could remove the keep clear. The traffic ops people don't like either of those ideas. You can move the hold line back a bit, try and open up some sight lines. It's a massive keep clear, but a few ideas there. There's a hidden rider a little bit, I think. Yep, there behind the tree. So again, but it's things like rubbish bins, signal controller boxes, shrubs, power poles, and things that can be just at the time that the driver has that quick look and the rider's behind it, and that can be enough. Surface. So motorcyclists, yeah, that canary in the coal mine when it comes to road surface and the mechanics of that lean and the too small contact patches on the road means surface is really important. And it's most important anywhere that a rider is going to be braking or leaning or making emergency maneuvers. So approach to a curve, through the curve are our most important areas where we want that, yeah, good skid resistance and consistent surface. We'd like that everywhere. But, so here we see a depression under a 3 meter straight edge, and these kind of things will destabilize a rider and alter their line. I did a fatality, in-depth fatality investigation into a double fatality motorcyclist and pillion passenger on the Great Alpine Road, where there was a depression in the road, and seems pretty much that the rider and pillion have come in and been sort of moved onto the other side of the road by that depression. They sort of had to pull the bike upright and then to an oncoming vehicle. So it's yeah, it's a real challenge. As Dan's saying, there's a lot of this going on out in the network. There's not enough maintenance funds out there. So motorcyclists are pretty attuned to warning signs of these sorts of things, and will adjust accordingly. There's going to be more and more of those out there. The interesting thing, though, is we investigating that one that I was just talking about was that the depression under the 3 meter straight edge was just inside intervention level under the Road Management Act and the Road Management Plan. But it just shows that those intervention levels we put in maintenance regimes are really not set for motorcyclists. And on a popular motorcycle route, you might want to reconsider some of those intervention levels. But then you get back to that point of there's not enough money to maintain the existing assets, let alone putting a higher maintenance criteria on stuff. So it's problematic. Yeah, but there's plenty of the network that's in poor condition. You don't need to see too many photos of it. You see it all the time. But also we think about gravel, mud, and wash around from work sites and scooters and motorcyclists. We're creating somewhat slippery surfaces for them. Patching is an interesting one, and how patching is done. And there's a lot of patching that the seams are right in the riding line of a rider. And that's probably an area where if it's going to break up, it's likely it'll start breaking up there. And ideally you do full width patching if you can. It's hard. Sometimes it's extra money. Just something to have to think about. There's a patch that's failing. It's not actually failing at the seams, which is interesting. But these are the ones where that early warning to riders of this is so important. This one happens to be on a curve. It's in a popular motorcycle area. It doesn't have great sight lines to this point. A rider's pretty stuck in their line and their position. And if that's a surprise, their only choices are to pull the bike upright and try and go through that, which would really result in them being out here, or try and go around it on the outside on the wrong side of the road. Coming inside that is not an option. Steel plates are it can be a very slippery surface with a bit of moisture, and it looks so obvious, and sometimes as a road safety auditor you're out there and it's so blindingly obvious that that's there, you think to yourself, how would anybody miss that? But you do have to get yourself in that mindset of, okay, it's night, or it's, you know, foggy and it's a bit rainy, and following behind a vehicle on a bike. And now we're in scenarios where it's certainly possible that that would be hit somewhat unexpectedly, and it's very hard to keep traction. So if those do need to be in the roadway, there's skid resistant surfacing that can be provided on those, coloured skid resistant surfacing, and the bolts are a little bit up on this. I don't like that, but at least it's sort of a bit easier to see, and it's skid resistant. Ideally, we don't have these in the circulating carriageway. So those are temporary ones, but then this one's sort of more your permanent feature. And this is where, if you're looking at a road design and they've got pit lids proposed in the roadway, if at an audit stage we can suggest that not occur, that could be very, I suppose, beneficial for riders. This one's in a roundabout. A rider's going to be looking around for vehicles entering into the roundabout, where they're going, and all of those characteristics, not as focused on the ground in front and on a bit of a lean. So it's not a great scenario. Yep. So can be buried the pit lids if they can't be removed, which yeah, is a useful option. Of course, lots of ways to improve surface, but skid resistance improvements can be done through water blasting, which is to blast water onto it and expose the aggregate. So that's a good one. High friction surfacing is available, and you can see some there. It's expensive, but this is done on the approach to the intersection and throughout the intersection, not on the departure. That was because this is thinking, well, motorcyclists need to brake heavily, and other vehicles, and more likely to need to avoid in the intersection rather than on the exit there. And we do like, where possible, to seal up to barrier systems so motorcyclists have a chance, because if it's an unsealed area, they have to pull the bike upright, or have lost control, and are more likely to strike the barrier system, which we'll talk about in a second. Curbing. So barrier curb will destabilize a rider, and the more mountable, the better, if we can. Here's an example. I'll jump over to a little video just showing you how small a lip can destabilize a rider. I actually think the value of this roundabout's pretty good. They've made it so it it stands out, and it's a small lip, but this is more just showing you the dynamics of a rider hitting a surface change. So hopefully that's streamed through for you, and the small lip there destabilizes the bike, and they slide into that. The grab rail is what we call it, which is there for bike riders to hold on to. I showed it in New Zealand. They showed me their PVC type grab rails, which I thought were quite interesting. I think they might hold up the UV light pretty well, but at least they'd take away on impact, I suppose. But big sways of line marking is a common thing that people sometimes want to do in the road network. And we know thermoplastic line marking, like, it can get quite slippery. And so we discourage these big sways of line marking. We need line marking in the road network, but we've got to think it could be a slip hazard. One thing that I've seen come up quite a number of times in my auditing career is where there's an intersection with an overshoot problem, and so somebody's proposing to do a variety of things. You know, usually they're doing advanced warning signs, some approach rumble strips. And then they seem to want to paint a big stop sign at the intersection as that final warning, or a big give way sign. And so I always come back in the audit and say, well, that's the exact spot where if a motorcyclist is in the situation where they're realizing they've got to give way late, or like they're slamming on the brakes and they're going to hit a patch of paint right then, which could be slippery. So, and like that as an idea. And signs, of course, we've got normal signs to warn, inform, guide, and the consistency of those is great for motorcyclists and other road users. We have particular motorcycle warning signs that can be used to highlight a specific issue for motorcyclists. And as I understand, those are used in New South Wales. I haven't personally used any, employed any in New South Wales, but I do understand that you can use those and warn of specific hazards for motorcyclists more than other road users. But of course, just normal warning signs are great. And then if we get into strike hazards, motorcyclists are most likely to strike objects on the outside of curves. Other vehicles, it's a bit varied. Outside of curves is higher risk, but not as I suppose disproportionate to this. Cars will crash on the inside of curve quite a bit as well, a bit more than that. So there's a surface defect, and outside of curves got concrete blocks on a popular motorcycle route in New Zealand. This one was. So obviously not going to be good outcomes. And even in terms of hazards for motorcyclists, galvanized steel posts, easily strong enough to kill a rider. They're deemed frangible, but that's for passenger vehicles. So all of those galvanized steel posts are an issue. So we'd look to, you know, as an auditor, think about that. Could we consolidate these two maybe just so there's one in the middle, or do we even need this one? Is it blocking sight lines of a vehicle coming out here? Those are the sort of questions we could be asking, or potentially even at some locations saying, you know, are there more flexible sign ranges that would be appropriate? And really at the moment, there's only low mount signs that can withstand wind load and the like. There's a bit of work happening. We're working with a couple of universities on some designs on some slip-based signs for motorcyclists and cyclists, sort of impact thresholds, but strong enough to hold up to wind, which is a bit of a challenge. And riders lean going around curves. So thinking about where furniture is placed, this will be taken out by a truck before motorcyclists, I reckon. But anyway, and again, here's a staged photo of a rider leaning around a corner there. So barriers, obviously, well, they're designed for cars and trucks, and motorcyclists haven't been factored into the design. Half the motorcyclists that strike a barrier system go over the top. The other half are sliding and they hit the base. So for the base, there's underrun protection, and I use the term underrun protection, not just rub rail. Rub rail is one type of underrun protection. There are lots of others. There's proprietary products. Biker Mate, MPR, and some other one. But the idea is that, you know, a sliding rider, maybe at 60 or 70 kilometers an hour, hits one of those posts, they're in huge, huge trouble. They're sliding and they hit this, they're in less trouble. It's not going to be friendly, but they slide along it. And we can do retrofit of underarm protection to existing WBeam systems, or most new products. In fact, all flexible WBeam products have a appropriate motorcycle underarm option available. So let me just show you some crash. Just show you what we're dealing with. This is down at Crash Lab. This is one of your motorcycle dummies. They cost $300,000 or something. Incredibly expensive. And this is a 60 kilometer per hour, 25-degree angle, sliding at the post. And yep, there you go. That's pretty much written the dummy off. But with underarm protection, you can see, so the first one was easily fatal. The second, this one is within survival limits in the sort of level 1 and 2 injuries. So, as I say, not great, but definitely survivable and recoverable. Now, yeah, they need some rehab, absolutely. Now, why have we only got rub rail up to this point? Or sorry, it's not rubber, it's MPR. Why have we got underarm protection only up to that point? Yes, Justin is on fire today. It's the terminal, and Nicole's provided further detail on that. We're unsure what would happen if you connected your underarm protection on the terminal, because nobody's ever tested that. That's not what they're designed for. And the manufacturers aren't going to do that because they need to do 8 crash tests on a terminal or any variants on a terminal. And the crash tests cost about $200,000 each because it's a real crash test. It has to be set up and all of that. So they're not going to do that. Yeah, so as an auditor, you can sort of think about this, and often if they've worked out their barrier length of need that they want and it ends right at a point, but you still think there's concern, you can recommend, extending the barrier a little bit more so that the terminal is in a lower risk point, which this one might be. Yeah, I don't know. A rider coming around here, I think you're going too fast into that, may sort of come out in that general direction. But yeah, it looks like it's starting to get into a lower risk point. Now, wire rope safety barrier on motorcycles, it's a non-issue. It's a lot of attention, but it's really not an issue. The reason for it is wire rope safety barrier systems are not used on popular motorcycle routes because they can't be, because they're a barrier in tension, and if you put it on a windy road and tension it up, the posts just will give way and the wires will go in the middle. So it's not used in those areas. It's used in areas that are extremely low risk for motorcyclists because it's usually on straights. Very occasionally it was used in some other scenarios, but nowadays, because we have flexible W-beam systems, your Easy Guards, your Ram Shields, your Sentry Guards, which all have underarm protection available and all are a highly effective flexible barrier system, we'd use that every time, the flexible W-beam system. The reason why we, started trialing these things around Australia, these sort of like crash cushions, crash protectors, around posts of wire rope systems, like football goal post padding, was because you wanted to use wire rope systems in absolutely every scenario you could, because it was more flexible than a G4 system, and it was going to provide this wonderful benefit for vehicles that leave the road and strike it, as compared to hitting a G4 system, which we knew is harsher, and we had issues with spearing and a few other challenges. But now with the flexible W-beam system, if I ever got to a point like, was it this one where we said, actually, if it was existing, but if you're designing and you got to a point, you said, well, we'll put stack cushions, these are called, on each post, you just change barrier system, go to a flexible W-beam system with underarm protection every time. It didn't occur back then. Yeah, so maintenance can be easier with flexible W-beam systems. Wire ropes in some situations can be installed cheaper, but yeah, all of life cost, I think W-beam products flexible W-beam tend to come out on top. I just jumped through that. There are particular nuances to looking at how these are attached. Just follow manufacturer's specifications. You don't attach to the post like that, because you've got bits that stick out. You've got bits where legs and arms could get in. And we want to think about gaps under these and where we're running things to. And finally, speed, and this will be right on time that I'll be able to talk you through your audit. Speed's very influential on crashes for motorcyclists, and if we can provide advice one way or another to get appropriate speeds, be that things like appropriate speeds into a curve, and we can assist through advisory speeds or advanced warning sign or Chevron alignment markers. Do remember though that cam is on a galvanized steel post is a fixed hazard for a rider on the outside of the curve, so be considerate of that. Advisory speeds, regulatory speeds, they all provide good value, and as an auditor you might be thinking about suggestions to try to get that speed, change that speed. So motorcycle audits, and we do a lot of those around the country, and I've done a fair bit there in New South Wales, but it's where you get a experienced motorcyclist and ideally a motorcyclist who is an auditor as well, and a trailing car with another couple of auditors, or somebody who's just concentrating on the driving and an auditor, and you go through and you get insights from the rider and the audit team, and you're looking at existing routes and you're coming up with proposed upgrades. It can be done in urban areas or popular motorcycle routes or anywhere. So this one is talking about the back of the W-beam system there, where if a rider was in the right lane and a vehicle changed lanes in front of it, which happens a lot because riders are smaller, and the rider had to avoid, they're going to potentially snag on the back of the W-beam system there because it doesn't connect the back-to-back all the way up. There is a fact sheet, again, in the learning management system on motorcycle-specific audits, so I don't need to go into too much detail. You can have a look at that if you ever want to do one, or I've got some videos, short videos about that whole process. All right. Well, keep your questions coming in as we go, but I do want to spend our last 15 minutes or so, and maybe give you a little bit of time back, taking you through the assignment, the big assignment for the course. So, time for me to just swap screens here. Okay, so in our learning management system, which you're all very familiar with now, you've been going through and answering questions. Maybe I'll just change myself to a student. So you'll see what you're used to seeing. So you've got all of your different modules. You got your information there, 2, 3, and we're into module 4. And so what we've got here, you've got your slides from these sessions. There are some of the videos I was playing. I've done some extra case studies and videos, just if there's more stuff in there if you want to have a look at it. They're the fact sheets that I was talking about. Then we get into here is, there's a quiz. I'll start down here. You've got to do a normal quiz. So hopefully that won't take you long. We've got a safe work method statements because we're going to ask you to go out to a local site, a site near your home or near your office or whatever address you provided us. We're going to give you a design of changes to a site there. We're going to ask you to go out there and have a look at it. We just want you to assure us that you are going to do that as safely as you can, and you're not going to be intoxicated, and you're not going to, if you had to drive a long time, you're going to take a break. But if you had to drive a long time, just tell us and we'll give you a site closer to you. So you just confirm that you'll follow that safe work method statement. Then you go into this, complete your road safety audit. And so what we've got here is the first thing is the road safety audit template. Now, what I've done is I've provided a template that conforms to the current Austroads Guide to Road Safety 2022. It includes recommendations. In theory, for New South Wales, you just knock off the recommendation line. You are going to, anything that's highlighted yellow, you're going to need to action, to change, to put your own words in. This is just a template. You could use this if you want for other things, rebrand it. No, yep, it's all yours to use. So there's lots of little bits to update, put a new map in and the like. Now, I'll show you shortly. You've got a drawing and you'll be able to download that. Other people have the same site, and I am okay if multiple people do the audit as a team, but I want every team member listed here. So you'd add some rows, list all team members here, okay? And everybody submits an audit. And it's all the same, if you're working as a team, or you could do different audits. But if you're out, daytime inspection only. For a real audit, you get out there at night as well, but we've said we're not going to do that due to RSA risk management. You can make some overarching comments here. You do that at the end. Sign it off. So that's what we do with audits. They're a formal document. We sign them off. This is a training exercise, but we're going to get you into that practice. You're going to provide a photo of you or the people you're out there with all together or whatever it is, just to prove to us you went to this site. That's one of our requirements that we have, from Queensland government, New South Wales government, Victorian government, and others that say, well, to do this course, they still have to go to a site. They have to look at a site, they have to look at a plan, they have to imagine that plan being built at the site. And then you're into the actual findings. And what we're going to get you to do is write up a finding. Here's an example. You're going to write up finding, you're going to risk rate it using the risk chart in there. You are going to provide recommendations, and you're going to categorize those into primary or supporting. As I say, that might be eliminated if you're going to do one in New South Wales, but I'm going to ask you to do it for this one. It's good practice anyway. You'll see there, only 3 issues. Only want 3 issues. Put that snippet or put a photo of the site. Only 3 issues. You might find 20 things, but we only want you to write up 3, just to keep it, as streamlined as we possibly can. So then you'll finish that, PDF it, because that's easier, and you will add submission, and you'll drop it in there and save changes, and it'll be submitted. So where are your sites? Well, you can see here, there's a site, and then you can see these people have that site to do, and it's this design. So let's have a look at that one. I don't know what this is, but let's have a look. Okay, so it's a proposal to put a roundabout at this location. And your task, is to take this, look at it. Okay, what crashes could happen when this is built? Right? Not at the moment, the existing conditions, what crashes could happen. When this is built, what crashes could happen? What are we creating here that causes, an increase in risk? Or what sort of risks are not being treated by this as well? So you can see there's not a huge amount of detail. It's a very conceptual idea. It's not a bad stage to audit, because you can get some, well, certainly they'll be up for change in this design. So have a think about, that, and then come up with 3 findings and write them up. Now, if your name's not there, or if you go, well, that's actually a really long way and really inconvenient for me, let us know, and we'll see what else we can do. We can swap you onto another site. So let's have a look. There's lots of different designs at different levels. Okay, it's another roundabout. So I'll pop back to there. I'll just check for questions. Yep, so it looks like everybody's pretty comfortable. I'll just stress this again. You are auditing these designs. You're not auditing the existing conditions of the site. The reason you go to look at the existing conditions of the site is to imagine that that's built, to look at how it ties in, to look at the land use, how people are using the area, look at existing services and other bits and pieces that may not have been picked up, and that's what you're commenting on. Date due, Thursday the 16th of March, 14 days. Now, next session, I'm going to give you some little group activity to do, which is going to be looking at some plans, coming up with audit findings. So we're going to get a bit of practice for this as well, but that's next week. You can get started on this. You've got 3 attempts. If you're struggling at all, get in contact and we'll we can have a chat about it. Okay, Dan doesn't appear to be on the list. Okay, Dan, are you, is one of those close to you, I suppose, is the question, because you just joined that team, and I'll, otherwise we'll get one to you. I'm making a note of it. Okay. Okay, looks like there could be one. I'll get somebody to get in contact, Dan, and we'll make sure there's one for you. If they send you one and there's another one that's convenient, just go to the other one. Great. Well, I'm going to give you a little bit of time. Finish that quiz off. Download this. get into it and enjoy your auditing. Wear your high-vis vest out there, take a photo of yourself, and we'll see you next week for our final session. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
See ya.
Thanks.
Bye.
Tim.
Bye.
Cheers.
Thanks.
Thank you.